Yo, Jack Flex, answer the fucking phone, dude.
So molested at 7 till 10 by your stepfather. I think the first question that I want to open up with is, tell me a little bit about your biological mother and father, and then how your mother met your stepfather.
So my mom and dad, they were married. I think they were married for like I think it was 7, and they got divorced right around when I was 7. My childhood was good. Like, we had like the tire swing in the backyard, barbecues, and went on 2-week vacations every summer as a family. I do think, when I look back now as an adult, I do think my dad struggled with alcoholism, but he hid it from us. And my mom cheated on my dad all the time. There were just things, like, when I think back now, that make me realize, like, oh, she was out cheating on my dad, and that's probably contributed to his alcoholism. And then my stepfather, he was a family friend. Like, he was a part of our life for as long as I can remember before him and my mother got together.
Now where you are, when it comes to your mother, do you hold any resentment or anger towards her because of the fact that she was cheating on your biological father? That alone, as of right now, before we get into anything else, that specific thing.
No, I think my mother was very traumatized and damaged. And I think that led to a lot of the made throughout her life.
In present day, how is your relationship with her and your biological father?
I don't have a relation with my mother. I haven't had contact since 2011. Like, the day I went to jail was the last time I ever spoke to my mom, which is a whole other story. And then my dad, we were extremely close. He fell and hit his head one night in January 2021, and he died.
Oh, that's insane. We'll come revisit all of this in just a couple of seconds. So you had also mentioned too that your stepfather was a family friend. Was he coming over, just talking to you guys? What was the nature of your relationship with him?
Yeah, he would come over. My mom, I think, worked with his wife at the time. Like, when we were growing up before my parents got divorced, and we would play with their kids. Like, we would go over their house, they would come to our house. Like, we would go on trips together. Nothing bad. There were no signs.
The divorce happens between your mother
Mhm.
and how long does it take for your mother to eventually remarry with this family friend?
Like, my dad was not even all the way out the door yet, and my stepfather was moving in. So I'm pretty sure there was probably something going on already. I think they were married within a year of my parents being divorced.
Do you have any siblings or anything?
No, I have a brother. My brother's 18 months younger than me, and then I have an older sister who's 5 years older than me.
That makes you the youngest, right?
I'm the middle child.
No, my bad. I swear, man. I'll be listening, like, editing it post. I'm like, damn, am I not paying attention? But no, like, I swear I am. I just, in conversation, there's just so much to think about. I just get caught up a little bit.
You're okay.
I was gonna ask regarding your sibling, how did they, from what you remember, setting aside the molestation, everything else that's happening in time, how are they feeling about it?
Not good. My sister, so she was a little bit older, and she kind of wasn't around that much. She was out with her friends all the time. My brother, he started to act out, and he became kind of like a pyromaniac. Like, he set a bedspread on off, and then he eventually caught himself on fire, and 22% of his body is burned, third and fourth degree burn. And he almost died. That happened in front of me. He caught on fire and almost died in front of me.
Your life is crazy.
It's been a wild ride, man.
Like, I heard the jail thing. I'm like, all right, we'll come back.
Yeah.
We haven't even gotten to, like, the molestation part. That's crazy too. Your brother was on fire in front of you. Oh my God.
Yes.
How old were you when that happened?
I was 9 and he was 8.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my.
Yeah.
So when you saw him, on fire, how did that play out?
I don't know how. I leapt to action, and Funny story, we were home from school because we both had a little cold. My mom was at work. My stepfather actually saved.
Does that create a little bit of, complex emotion given the fact that he did something good for somebody but did something so terrible to you?
Not for me, but it did for my brother. My brother struggled with feeling like he needed to have a relationship with him, or feeling like he owed it to him to have a relationship with him for many. Doesn't anymore, but he did. He felt like my stepfather saved his life, and he owed it to him to try to have a relationship.
How does your sister feel about the stepfather?
I am also no contact with her. She has a relationship with my mother. My sister is very probably for an hour just talking about her and the way that she's reacted to everything that she's been through. She's very toxic. And I think that there's a jealousy. I don't know how else to describe it. She wants to be the center of attention. And in her mind, the things that me and my brother went through made us the center of attention. Jealous of that. And that sounds like horrible, but I don't know how else to describe her.
That's very real. Getting attention, especially when you're younger, it's a really big part of developing the ego, the sense of self, your personas, and how you deal with the complex world of emotions that we all deal just every day, right? Just setting aside.
Yeah.
I mean, the crazy ass shit we just talked about, we could set that aside. Just waking up every day as like, a regular human. It's very complex in and of itself, right? It's such a unique experience. And
it is.
And when these things that you've just told me, I mean, damn, like, it captures my attention because of my curiosity and who I am, but I'm sure it garners quite a bit of sympathy, rightfully, and an extension of empathy, rightfully, because that's. I mean, I can't really imagine what that does to someone. But I think that especially when you're a kid and these things happen and you see the attention just being placed elsewhere, negative sense of self, even though it's not guided in the right direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And you think about that, but then she's 5 years older than me, so she's 43 now, and she is still like that. I'm 38, and so that's where it's like, okay, I'll always be a work in progress, and I'll to get better and be better for the rest of my life. And I know that I have to work towards that, but it's been like a decline, and she hasn't taken any responsibility for her mental health and tried to get better. So at some point you have to say, okay, this is not serving me in a healthy way, so I have to walk away from this relationship.
I'm assuming that you and your brother are pretty cool.
Yeah, we're super close.
All right, so let's open up this first can of worms. And this can being, so we talked about how the divorce happened. Stepfather ends up moving in. How are you feeling about it at this time? Do you have any red flags, green flags? What's it looking like?
It was like fun at first. It was, he taught me how to rollerblade, and then he had me enroll in like jujitsu with him, and then I was learning jujitsu, and I felt like this little tiny mousy giant glasses like dorky kid living in urban New Jersey, and I didn't have a lot of friends, so I felt like special. Now I know he was grooming me, but I didn't know that as a child. I didn't know that. I just felt like it was someone giving me attention. My dad just left. My dad was life, so there wasn't any red flags. It took a little while for that to start happening, and then it started to, I'd be in the bath, I'd make myself a bath, and he'd find a reason to come into the bathroom, or I'd be getting dressed, and for now when I think back, there must have been a camera or something in my room show up in my room while I had no shirt on. And then it started to be, hey, there are things that I could teach you about your body that can be just between us, and it would be really healthy, and it would be really good, and we could be really close. And it felt weird and uncomfortable, but I didn't know how to say no. It turned into, well, if you say no, then I'm going to make you feel bad about yourself. I'm going to exclude you from the family. I'm going to make your mom not want to be around you. So then it was that kind of dynamic.
I think it's really interesting too how you brought up how he was kind of grooming you and he showed you how to do like jiu-jitsu classes too, because Actually, I did interview somebody else who was molested by, coincidentally, their stepfather also, at the age of 2, all the way up until, I believe, 8. And it's very interesting to see how both individuals went about these abuses in different ways. I would say that the other one in the went about it in a much more commanding and a much more as if the whole house kind of operated under his boot, so to speak. But it seems here as though this guy was a lot more discreet in his approach and a lot more.
Oh, super discreet. No one would have known had my sister not caught him. I don't know that.
And another layer too is this, again, jiu-jitsu, and it's pretty much the art of martial arts on the ground, choking people out, submissions, positions, and again, the stepfather, coincidentally, the other one was a boxer.
Oh wow!
So this level of a physical threat itself, of being an adult, being a predator towards a child, with an added factor of a knowledge of how to enact violence for sport, but at the end of the day, you can use it for self-defense or for sport. And as somebody who practices MMA myself, I mean, I wouldn't imagine using that against anybody for any other reason besides sport, let alone a child. Added layer and that added threat is very chilling to me, especially since I feel as though so many people I encounter doing these sports in particular are very honest people. So you're talking about how he's so discreet in his approach. These things that he's doing, he's kind of like building himself up towards something, it seems. Idea of this as a kid, but did you have a feeling like he was building up towards something, or like something was off?
I started to, when he would have me sit on his lap, and the way he would put his hands the way my husband puts his hand on my hip bone, and it gave me a bad feeling inside. Think back on it. And then it turned into, hey, here, play with these Barbies while I do this to you. And then that's kind of how it started. And then it was just like every single night. There was never a night that it didn't happen unless I wasn't there.
How was he able to proceed with these abuses? So methodical in his approach that he did it on a schedule where nobody would interrupt?
Pretty much. It was always really late, like waking me up in the middle of the night kind of thing. Everybody would be asleep. And the way the house was set up, it was a 3-story house. His and my mom's bedroom was up in the attic by itself. He would come down the stairs, and then my bedroom door was directly across from the attic stairs. So he could come right across the hallway and into my room. And again, my sister, she was rarely at the house. And my brother is one of those people, when he falls asleep, you could literally fart on his face and he wouldn't wake up. Add that in there now.
It's a crazy question to ask, but over time, that the sexual abuse was getting more extreme or intense?
It was over time. It started to become where it never happened. And for some reason, my little child brain knew to not allow him to try to penetrate. So he tried that and wasn't, I started to get upset where I would have woken the whole house up. Then he was trying to force me to do stuff to him and I wouldn't do it. So it was always him doing something to me.
When he would try to coerce you into doing these things and you were not I had brought up this other stepfather who had this very strong hold on that household, so to speak. In order to get the child he was abusing to be compliant, he would actually buy this person pets and then harm the pets and actually end up killing them as a form of emotional abuse to keep his child under. So when you weren't complying, I know you had mentioned earlier, he had a certain method of keeping you or giving you some sort of punishment.
Yep, he did. He knew how close me and my brother were. So he would get my mom to kick my brother out, even though my brother now, there wasn't a burn survivor, but it got to that point where he needed a lot of help. And then my mother would send him to my dad's house in Pennsylvania. So we're in New Jersey, and then my brother would disappear. And it would be my stepfather and then my stepfather would say to me, see, I could make it where your mother will never talk. if you don't do what I want you to do.
Did you continuously just not comply, or did he just eventually end up coercing you into doing something worse? Or at that point, was it when your sister actually ended up finding out what was going on?
It was at that, my sister kind of probably saved me, because it probably would have something worse. He had come into my room. It was really late at night, and it was one of the rare occasions that my sister slept at home, because she would normally stay at her boyfriend's house or a friend's house, or she would be out, running the streets all night long. Our bedrooms were connected, and there was a door. It had one of those old, and my sister, from what she told me, she heard kissing noises and looked through the keyhole and saw everything. And then came out of her room screaming for my mother. My mother came down screaming, saying, are you touching her? What are you doing? And my sister already called the police. And then that was...
Earlier you had mentioned, your brother had lit himself on fire, which is, again, a whole nother can of worms. Hopefully we'll get back to that later. But in moments like those, like these high stress, intense moments, it kind of seems as though time kind of slows down and your thoughts kind of cease as you're kind of sucked completely into the moment, right? I think from your perspective, you just would have ended up hearing screaming, right?
Yep, I heard screaming, and then, because I would close my eyes while he was doing whatever he was doing. I guess it was my way to try to go to another place in my mind. And I felt the bed shake, because he jumped up and he said, "Oh, fuck." I remember that, and I fucked a lot of my childhood. I have a terrible memory of my childhood, but I remember that. I can see it now, because he knew he was caught.
So he jumps up, he says, "Oh, fuck."
Yep.
Your mother, I presume, eventually ends up entering the room, no?
He actually opened the door, because I think he was going to try to run out before. Remember, my mom's bedroom was in the attic. Hear her get up. I could hear her footsteps coming to her door to come down the stairs. And my sister out in the hallway screaming, saying every name you can think of. My stepfather is half black. So if you can think of names relating to that, she was screaming at the top of her lungs at him. And he was out in the hallway with the door open, and my mother came. She flung the attic door open and said, "Are you touching her? What the fuck is going on? What are you doing? Why are you down here?" And he was like, no, wait, I wasn't doing anything. And my sister was like, "Yes, you were. I saw you. I watched you." To my sister, and then my sister was on the phone with the police at this point, screaming at him, screaming at 911. And then I kind of don't remember what happened after that. The next thing I remember, he was in handcuffs downstairs, and then the police were telling my mom to have me come to the station because they wanted to. And then I had to do a rape kit. I remember that I had to do a rape kit.
When that whole altercation happened, how was your heart feeling? Was your blood pumping? Were you thinking anything? Could you even think anything?
I was thinking that I did something wrong and I was going to be in trouble. That's what, in my mind, I thought I did something wrong and I was in trouble.
You had mentioned too, so he ends up going to the station, right?
Yeah.
I've heard quite a bit about rape kits, but I've actually never, I'm quite hazy as to the process of it. For what you remember, how did that work? How were you feeling? Did it explain to you what was going on? What understanding did they give you since you were a child at that point?
My mom she was kind of blocking me from seeing what they were doing. And I could feel they swab probably to try to get DNA or something like that. And this is this is the late 90s, so I don't know how advanced they were with that yet. And my mom just kept saying, they're just going to make sure that you're okay. They're going to make sure. And they examined a small child. There would probably be some kind of damage down there, right? Which there wasn't, because remember, he was never able to do that, but they still did it. So I'm a little bit hazy. I remember laying on the table in the hospital, and then I remember feeling them doing stuff down there, but my mom being right in my face, kind of bent over me.
Happening, the next day after? Are there any repercussions, consequences? What's the setting looking like?
So at first, that first night when we came back home, I stayed home from school for 3 days, and my mom had me sleep in her bed with her every night. And she was snuggling with me, and she was telling me that I'd never have to see him again. And I remember this very vividly. I started snooping through his stuff, and I found a picture of what looks like his biological daughter in a very provocative position. So imagine a couch and a woman in a thong stilettos on, kind of straddling the couch and looking back at the camera kind of position. I found that picture and I remember giving it to my mom and saying, "This is Leon's daughter. This is Leon's daughter." And my mom kept saying, "No, it's not. No, it's not." And she took it. I don't know whatever came of that. And my mom kept telling me, "This isn't your fault. This isn't, you didn't do anything." And tell her I would apologize. That's how it went in the beginning.
Was he still living at that house?
No, he wasn't allowed. He wasn't allowed at the house. He wasn't in jail. I think he was in jail for a couple of days. And then I'm assuming my mother probably bailed him out. And he was living somewhere else. So he wasn't allowed anywhere near. So lived in a school zone. We lived like 1 block away from an elementary school. So he was not allowed anywhere around there.
That's a crazy ass 4 days.
Yeah.
Crazy ass life, really. Everything that you told me so far.
Now it's like when stuff happens, I'm like, meh, life happens.
All that happened. How does this kind of unfold? Does he end up getting some sort of repercussion? Do him and your mother end up talking again? How is your sister treating you? How is your brother treating you? And does your biological father know of this situation?
My dad found out from my sister. My sister and my dad were, they were always tight from the moment my sister was born. And my dad wanted to kill him, had a gun, came to our house, tried to get my mom to tell him where he was. For whatever reason, decided against that. Thank God. My brother was in the house with us. Everything was going, and my sister disappeared, and we didn't know where she was. I found out later, my sister found out that my mom was going to see my stepfather. And, she would go to work and then go see him. And she was working back up to being in a full-blown relationship with him again. And my sister started to raise holy hell. So my mom had her committed to a mental institution. Yeah, that was my mother's way of dealing with my sister. I'm going to have you committed. And now my mother is if you see her, you would never assume that she's this person. So people have a tendency of believing her when she says things. So my sister disappeared. And this all within a couple of months of him getting caught, okay? Me and my brother are walking home from school, and we can see our house basically from the school. And we see my dad. He had one of those big Chevy conversion vans, those home van things that were cool in the 90s. We see it. It was big blue van. And we're like, wow, Dad's here. So we're running because we're excited to see Dad. Well, we go to run up on the porch, and my dad stops us, and he says, "Hey, you guys can't go in there." And we were like, "Why?" And he's like, "Listen, your mother called me on Wednesday. This was a house. Your mother called me on Wednesday. She said that if I didn't pick you up by 6:00 on Friday, that she was going to get rid of you. So I'm here to get you. You're going to come live with me now." And he was crying. And then we started to, especially me, started to get really upset. And there was a garbage bag for me, a garbage bag. Again, my sister's in a mental institution, so there's no bag for her. And it was just some clothes that my mother must have just thrown in each of the bags. No toys, no pictures, no nothing. I remember getting in that van hysterical, and all of my friends, and as it drove away down the street, I remember that. And they were all yelling and screaming because they didn't want us to go.
So, but before we proceed, actually, I think it's very important that when I have these conversations, I abstain from judgment. But I do have a difficult time hearing about your mother in particular. I do feel sad, but I also feel as though I don't want to encourage a blind judgment on your mother. And I had also seen or heard you say earlier that she is there just seems to be something wrong with her. Do you know much about her childhood and how she was raised?
She was one of 5 kids. She was severely abused by her mother. I mean, my mother told me a story about her playing in the backyard with her brother. Her brother tripped her when she cried to her mom. Her mom threw a brick at her face. A brick at her child's face. She was neglected, abused, and then, a young adult, probably late teenage, early adulthood, just bounced around from relationship to relationship to relationship, just trying to find somebody to love her. She just wanted someone to love her, and probably didn't feel worthy enough to be in a healthy relationship. So I'm sure there was clearly because she's still married to my stepfather to this day. So there is a lot of layers to my mother. And I don't think that she chose him because she's evil. I think she chose him because she doesn't think that she deserves any better.
Word introduced so often in these conversations, especially when it comes to this level of childhood abuse, evil. As I'm hearing you talk about your mother and I'm hearing the things that she is now doing in the aftermath of everything that has occurred, it seems as though she did love you, to snuggle you and want to protect you, but it seems as though the love stepfather, it seems as though her value of romantic love seems to be misplaced or misvalued, if that makes sense.
Yep. 100%.
Do you think that stems from her mother abusing her?
I think so. I do. I truly think so. So I don't. People are always like, how can you not hate? Well, it's very two different sides. It's people saying you should have a relationship with your mother. You only have one mother, and then it's other people like, how can you forgive her? How can you not hate her and not want to destroy her life? Because she's just of us, and this is how she chose to deal with it.
Do you know why? This is your grandmother, right?
Yes, that I never met before. I never even met her.
For good reason, because your mother didn't want you to see her. Now I'm not saying that I can definitely understand about her character, and I'm much less willing to judge. I'm much less willing to be upset because I mean, where do you put the blame when it comes to her actions? Do you blame it solely on her, her childhood, a society issue? Where do you kind of look at that?
As someone who's had a lot of issues that drove me to drug addiction, it drove me to make really poor choices. At some point, you have to take accountability and you have to choose yourself. You have to want to get better, because now look at little girls. What would become of them had I not chosen to want to be better? So I do place the blame on her.
Very fair. I would also say that there are so many levels to this too. It's ideologically spanning from the 90s to also say that the conversation around mental health and how to actually take accountability for yourself has changed so much more since then too. I would say in a more positive way too.
Yes, it has. You couldn't be open like that. When my mother was growing up, you couldn't be open about this. There wasn't like, for me to strangers, but we're having this really good conversation. This might help someone. It helped me to talk about it and to get it out there. But that generation couldn't do that. They're the boomers. She's part of the boomer generation. They couldn't go out and get. I'm a millennial. She's a boomer.
That's real. That's real. She's a boomer.
You couldn't go out and get help like that. You would be made fun of. You could lose your career over it. You were judged by everyone around you. So I get it. She didn't have the resources. Didn't have the resources like I have now.
With all this in mind, let's cut back to the car. You're driving away. I would presume at this point it's made evident that your mother has chosen somebody else over you, really, in that moment. And I also wanted to clarify, when your mother said get rid of you, what does that mean exactly?
Don't know. I would not put it past my mother to murder us just to get us out of the way. And I'm not exaggerating about that. If she thought she could have gotten away with it and there was no other option. But my dad, more so, the more he talked about it, the more he made it sound like maybe she was just going to care system and get rid of us that way, just decide to give up her rights to us.
I presume at this point you'd end up living with your father.
Yes.
Is your sister still in the mental institution at this point?
My dad got her out within a week of us moving in with him. He got her out of there. And she moved with us to Pennsylvania.
Did all you guys as siblings end up talking? Yeah, shit that just happened? Or was this kind of too much to unpack?
I think in the beginning, it was a little bit too much to unpack. And I was still so upset that I just left my hometown, the only place I ever knew where all my friends were. And I missed my mom. Even through all of this, it still wasn't clicking yet. literally threw us away to let a pedophile come back into her home. I wanted my mom. I was like, where's mom? I want mom. I don't want to live here. Like, I want to. And my dad, you could tell it was just breaking his heart. So it took some time to start to talk about, like, what the hell happened to us.
I think at this point you were 10 or so, right?
Yep.
In your teenage, 10 to 18-ish years, how did your life end up unfolding?
Not well. So I was always super smart in school, and I always got along with my teachers. But when we first moved with my dad, remember, we each got a garbage bag of clothes, and my dad was dirt poor. We lived in a super rural area in the Poconos in Pennsylvania in the mountains, and we had nothing. Like, we literally didn't have running water. We would have to go to food pantries to get food. He didn't have money to get us clothes or anything like that. So then the bullying started with other kids. I dealt, and then once I realized, one day I stood up for myself, and I like whooped this girl's ass. And once I realized that I could whoop somebody's ass, I thrived in that anger and rage, and I used that as a shield. And I mean, if somebody accidentally bumped me in the hallway in school, their face was going to wind up in a locker. I wanted everyone to fear me.
Anger is a very powerful emotion. I mean, the physical stimulation that you get from anger, it's so energetic. It's so...
Yeah.
I feel like violence, to put it plainly, it's a good tool to get people to do what you want. Anger, in case, I feel like it was kind of like a form of protection.
It was. And now, we live with my dad, and we're super poor, but my dad is like this raging alcoholic. He's carrying a lot of guilt because he feels as though he can't provide for us. He feels as though he should have saved us. And then maybe my brother wouldn't have been burned. Maybe I wouldn't have been hurt the way I was. Maybe my sister wouldn't have wound up in a mental institution. And then the woman that he was with for all the years now, from the time he left my mom, she did not want to raise kids. So she left him, and he got so sick in love with her. Like, I feel maybe he felt she was his soulmate, and he got pneumonia and like almost died. We had to take care of him as children. Because he was so sick. And then it was just all these women coming through the house that he would bring home from the bar. Like, we would wait and hear him like fucking these women all over the house. And then he was kind of abusive in his alcoholism. So I had a lot of anger because my life went from this normal, white picket fence childhood to this. Felt like it was my fault.
28-ish years, how does this end up panning out for you once you kind of end up becoming your own person?
I always had the mentality that everybody should feel sorry for me, and I would manipulate people into helping me. I would manipulate men into relationships just to take care of me, and I was not a good person. Then I found heroin, and heroin was like, it was like going into the white light that people talk about when you die. It was this warmth that wrapped me up, and it was something I'd been searching for since childhood. So that took me down a really dark, long road.
At what age did you find out about heroin or start using?
So the first time I tried heroin, I was like 15, but it was just like I sniffed it at a friend's party, and it was fun. And I did it that one time, and then I did it one other time a few years later. It was like a party thing. I didn't get like addicted to it until I was about 25. Where I was like 40 bags of heroin a day. I was shooting into my veins.
But you had talked about it being kind of like this white light. Can you describe to me like the high of heroin? What does that physically feel like?
It is, how can I describe it? It's like if you stand up too fast down for a while and you get really lightheaded, and then you get really warm, and then all of the fear and all of the hurt and shame and the anger, it just melts away, and you just are floating there. And I just didn't want to feel anymore, so that's what I would do to not feel.
When you were 25, how was your relationship with your siblings at that point after everything that happened with your father?
So I was still talking to my siblings at that point. My dad I was talking to, but our relationship was pretty damaged because of who I was becoming, or who I had become, and also because of my dad's alcoholism. But my was starting to see like that I was becoming a terrible, awful person, and now I'm a terrible, awful drug addict. So they kind of very slowly.
Oh man, it's real.
It is. They all started to kind of back away, like it was love you from a distance kind of thing, because I was stealing, I was living in cars, I was not working, I was driving around illegally, I was like bouncing around from relationship to relationship, and they would always. So eventually, I did not have any family because they all needed to just stay away from me because I was out of control.
Did you ever have like a dream of what you wanted to be? Did you ever have like a idea of who you wanted to be or what you wanted to do as a career, maybe?
Not really. I don't think I had time because I was just so entrenched in my trauma and just living in it. Yeah, I never thought about any of that stuff. I didn't care about. Like I said, I did get good grades. I was one of those people that I pretty much skated through school. The only struggles I had in school was when I would get suspended for shit out of someone. But I didn't really care about college. My dad was trying to get me like, hey, go into the military. Like you can have your life can be set if you take the right steps. I didn't do that. I was just kind of floating through life.
How did your heroin addiction at that point kind of escalate, and then
I started to get in trouble. So me and my friend, this guy Kevin that I was friends with, we were like heroin friends. We weren't real friends. We would just do heroin together. We would go into a Sears, and I would make myself look really unassuming. Like I'd do my makeup, do my hair, wear a really nice outfit so I didn't look like I was about to rob the fucking store. And then I would go in. I would go into the store and I would stack like 10 Blu-ray disc players up on my arms, and I would run out of that motherfucker. And he would be out in the parking lot, pick me all the little alarm things off of it, and we'd go pawn them. And then we would, get high. We would go buy drugs with whatever money we got from the pawn shop. Got caught doing that. So went to jail, sat in jail for a little while, detoxing. And at this point, I was pregnant and didn't realize I was pregnant. I was pregnant with my son at this point. And I'm doing heroin, living in Blu-ray disc players to support my heroin habit. Wound up in jail. That's where I found out I was pregnant. And immediately, in Pennsylvania at least, if you're in jail and you demand an abortion, they have to pay for it. And I knew that. So I was fighting with them to get me an abortion, get me an abortion, get me. They were trying to get me set up to get an abortion. And once they realized, like, hey, this isn't as easy as we thought it would be, they released me because they'd rather not deal with it. So I wound up living in a shelter for a little while and pregnant still, but I was clean. And then I had a son on December 6th, 2010, clean for a little while. And then I started to fall off again. And now I'm on probation because of this trouble that I got into. It was like simple possession charges, retail theft. It was a whole bunch of stuff. And I started failing drug tests. Pennsylvania, at least the county that I lived in, they didn't play around with that. If you fail a drug test, you're going to jail. So I failed a drug test, and my probation officer told me, like, hey, you're going to have to do some jail time. So take this. It's going to take about 30 days for you to have to go to court. I'm not going to take you to jail now. I want to give you time to find a place for your son to go. And I wasn't really looking for a place because in my mind, still, everything will work out. Someone else will fix this. I don't need to do any work. Well, my sister called me one day and asked if she could hang out with my son. And I said, yeah, sure, come pick him up. She came and picked him up and immediately called my probation officer and said that I abandoned him. So now my probation officer is involved. And my sister started to foster my son, and I went to jail anyway. I went to jail for 4 months because of my drug use. And while I was in jail, I demanded a visit with my son because he was only 11 months old, but in my selfish mind, he was my son and I deserved to have a visit with him. This 11-month-old baby into a county jail so he can see his mother, who he may not remember, through glass because you can't have any physical contact. And he screamed bloody murder because he was terrified. And I remember running away crying. And that was the first moment hey, I think I need to do something different because this is not working anymore. And that was the moment that my recovery started.
Is that rock bottom?
That was my rock bottom.
Earlier, you had mentioned that the last time that you spoke to your mother was when you were in jail. Did you speak to her at this point?
No, it was right before I went to jail. I knew I was going to jail on a certain date, and I talked to her, and then I didn't talk to her anymore. And it was pretty much because she was like, you need. It happened like 15 years ago in reference to my molestation. And I was like, okay, I need to not talk to this bitch anymore.
That's a crazy ass response from her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that really how she felt?
That's how she felt. That is what she said to me. Yeah. And even at first I was like, wow, my mom's such a piece of shit. I'm so mad at her. But once I had that rock bottom moment, watching my son screaming and crying and terrified, my sister, because she's fostering him, looking at me with like a death stare, like I was this piece of shit, and way crying, that was the moment where I was like, I need to change. I either need to die or I need to change.
Do you hold resentment or any type of complex emotion towards your sister with, how she handled that? Or do you think that was the right thing on her part to do?
I did hold resentment towards my sister for it, but because my sister, she took my son, not because she was worried for him, but because her and my mother had this deal where if my sister got my son, my mom would compensate my sister. Like she would give her money, and it was a monetary thing for my sister. So for a while I did, but I worked through that. Had I not chosen drugs over my son, none of that ever would have happened. So at the end of the day, it was my fault, all of it.
What were the steps that you had to make to rebuild yourself?
While I was in jail, the only way I could be released was to have a home plan. I didn't really have any, but I started hearing about the counselor in the jail said, hey, we could try to get you into a recovery house. They're in York, PA. That's 120 miles away from the Poconos, but maybe that's a good thing because maybe you need to get out of this area. And I was like, I'll do it. Whatever. I want to do something different. I've never done rehab, kind of therapy, nothing like that. Let's try this. So that was part of my first steps into getting into recovery. And the day I got out of jail, one of my friends picked me up in jail and drove me all the way down to York. He bought me toiletries. He paid for my first 2 weeks in the recovery. He really tried to help me. I'll always care about him. He was a really good friend. Thanks, Jay Longo. That's his name if he ever listens to this. He was a good friend. And when you go into a recovery house, at least the one that I was in, you're on a 30-day blackout. So the only thing to do is go to meetings that you have to do a 90 meetings in 90 days. You have to find a sponsor and you can hang out at the house. Like you can go to IOP, like intensive outpatient, and you can work. You're not allowed to have contact with the opposite sex, no family visits, nothing like that, because they want to get you acclimated to recovery.
How with your son in present day?
So my sister had him for the first few months when I got out of jail. I went in October 24th, 2011. I got out February 24th, 2012. And my sister had him up until April of 2012. And then her alcoholic fiance wild one night and I guess cracked his head open, his head, not my son's. And the cops were called and my son was removed from my sister. I had seen my son once since that time in jail where he was screaming and crying and, it was horrible. But I had to go up to the Poconos to see at the CPS office. And now he's over a year old. He's a year and a half old. And he just screamed. There was no, how babies have that light in their eyes and they look they're like little angels. They just look happy.
Yeah, it's like light. I don't know.
Yeah. That wasn't there. There was no light in his eyes anymore. He was screaming and he was with a family that didn't speak any English. I remember that. I think they were maybe Indian. And I remember being really worried and feeling really guilty because now he's being bounced around to all these foster homes. through my recovery, it was December 2012. I had been working towards getting him back. That was the goal: get my son back, rebuild my life, and start over again. During this time of him bouncing around to foster homes, he got placed with a family that was willing to adopt, and our visit with him in December 2012, where the light was back on in his eyes, and he was happy, and he was playing, and he was running around. And I made this extremely difficult choice to sign my rights over to this family, because I felt like they deserved him more than deserved them more than me. I felt that it would have been selfish and not good for him for me to take him from this family that brought him back to life. So I did. I signed my rights over in like June 2013.
That's a very mature decision to make. And honestly, either way, even if you had panned out, I mean, the way it seems that your life was going at that point in time, it would have been fair either way. But that definitely is, that's some pure reason. I mean, that's a mature decision.
I think that was the first selfless thing that I had ever done in my life.
Do you think about him often?
Oh, I have pictures on the wall, and it's actually pretty cool because my brother's two sons, my nephews, are actually friends with my son. And then my brother and his wife are really good friends with my son's adopted family. So my brother and his family get to see my son's name all the time. So I get pictures. My son knows who I am. He knows that I'm his real mother. But I chose not to have communication with him because I didn't think it would be healthy for him. Hey, I'm your mom, Merry Christmas, Happy Birthday, and that would be the extent of our would be damaging to him. But I do think every single day, I always think about him.
Is he 18 plus yet?
No, he was born December 6, 2010, so he just turned 12.
Do you think that at some later point in your life, I mean, it seems as though, I would say, given the nature of the relationship as it is right now, it seems as though it'd be very likely for him to contact you in the future, I would say.
I think so. I hope so. I'll be here with open arms if he comes.
Is that something that you think that you're mentally ready for or prepared for?
Yes, I'm prepared for there to be some anger and resentment. I'm okay with that. I will be completely open and honest with him. I feel like my honesty maybe will help him. And maybe he'll be angry for a little while, but I've mentally, and I will continue to mentally prepare myself for that. And he has a right to feel that way, and I'm okay with that. Whatever it is, I'm ready for it.
I also do, I think you have kids right now, right?
I do. I have 2 daughters. The day that I signed my rights over for my son, I was pregnant with my daughter, Evelyn. She was born August 29th, 2013. I was visibly pregnant. So imagine what the judge and people in the courtroom, they were probably like, this piece of shit. It wasn't when they asked me, they were like, are you of sound mind? Are you on drugs? Are you making this choice in a healthy way? And I said, they were like, why are you doing this? And I said, have you seen him? Have you seen the light? I just kept saying the light is back on in his eyes. I'm away from that. I can't do that.
It's also interesting to me too, because, you have this life. I mean, you've had a crazy ass life. And yeah, my mom too has had a pretty crazy life. But I think that me growing up, she's very honest and she's told me a lot about it. Do you think that you're going to have that same approach or are already having that
I do have that approach with my kids. I'm very open and honest with them as much as I can be.
How have they received? You've told them about the molestation and stuff yet, or you're probably going to wait?
They obviously don't know details or anything. But they know that I was abused by my stepfather. My daughter, Evelyn, she's just one of those people, when you... But you could have a conversation with her the way that you and I are now. She's just one of those kids that she's just wise beyond her years. I'm very open and honest with my children. I feel it's better for them.
But later on, usually towards the end, I always ask, what is the caller's approach to life? Hey, if I ask you, and you said her name was Evelyn or Evelyn? Evelyn. Is that okay?
Yep, that's okay. I'm okay with that.
Okay, so we'll come back to that in a little bit. But I also wanted to ask, too, about the stepfather. As an adult, where you are now, how do you feel about him?
So for a long time, I struggled. I had this fantasy, of fucking murking his ass, like just suffocating him with a pillow or stabbing him. It was a fantasy. Like, I thought it was going to make my life better. Through therapy, he also had a horrendous childhood. His father murdered his mother, right? Father forced him to rape his sister while he watched. He went through a horrible childhood, and I know that I don't resent him. I forgive him.
It's a very mature take. The second you had mentioned that his father made him rape his sister.
Yeah.
Do you think maybe he was trying to relive that or heal that trauma through his attraction to children?
I think so. Maybe in his warped, broken mind, that was his way of trying to deal with it and live with it.
And how do you view in general, and how do you think that society should approach this? I mean, I think we could consider it somewhat of a taboo topic, even though I wish it wasn't. I wish we kind of talked about it more. But
I've actually thought about this a lot. I've thought about this a lot. As someone in recovery who's made many mistakes, I've had to make amends with a lot of people for things that I did to hurt them or wrong them. You read about it all the time. I have not heard of any child predator or pedophile ever being rehabilitated. I do not think that they should be allowed in society once they're caught. I don't.
I think that's a very fair take. I think that there's a clear moral issue clearly presented where if you do something to a child, I mean, it's kind of unspeakable and kind of, morally reprehensible regardless of the mental illness. Now,
exactly.
As for those who how do you think that society should approach that conversation and that topic?
As what? Someone that is a predator but hasn't been caught yet? Or what?
Yes. How do you think that we should... Do you think that it should be... I think that there's kind of like a... how do I say? Like a no entertaining, no nothing of pedophilia. And in the sense of offending, absolutely. I mean, like I said before, it's a clear moral issue regardless of the illness, that you should not act on those actions. But when it comes to those who are non-offending but still have this issue in their brain chemistry, how do you think that we should be approaching? What direction do you think the conversation should be going in regarding that?
They should be institutionalized at the very least, because, the children, they're like the future. They're going to be the people who are running this planet at some point, if this planet is still here, and to take from them because of whatever you've gone through in your life, whatever direction your life has gone. It should be a no nonsense, no second chance, nothing. You have to go.
Very fair take too. And I think also when it comes to, or I want to go back to your mother. So it seems as though, I mean, you guys haven't talked. I mean, I don't really see her budging, and I'm gonna say she's not budging because she's clearly in the wrong. There's nothing for you to budge, against.
I did write her an amends letter when I was, going through the 12 steps with my sponsor. I did write her making amends with her. I didn't blame her for anything. I didn't attack her. I didn't bring up anything that I felt that she did wrong. I tried to make amends with her for the part that I played in hurting her as an adult. I knew when I did have a relationship with my mom as a young adult, I knew that she would buy anything. My mother has a lot of money. She's in a very high up position in a big bank in America, and she has the money. And I was mean to her. If she was ever upset, I remember she's terrified of driving in the rain. I was terrified, and I would make fun of her. And I wanted to apologize for that. And I sent her this letter. And I wasn't trying to open the door for a relationship, but I never got a response, never anything. And I'm okay with that.
And I think it's a very human topic to acknowledge too, that, we live to eventually see our parents pass away. Do you truly feel, and I would say that you definitely, given the nature of everything you told me, I would say that you have, but do you truly feel at peace with where the relationship with her has led to and where it is?
I do. I feel I'm at I've done what I can, and I know that some people choose to stay damaged. And if that's the road that she wants to take, it hurts her more than it hurts me. I picture her dying and being alone, and that's sad. But that she made.
Do you have any type of faith?
Not really. I know I believe in something, but I'm not, I don't follow any religion. More, I practice witchcraft, but I guess somebody like me would, right? Oh.
Pagan, or
Yes.
what made you pick up pagan witchcraft?
So I started to I've always been interested in it, but it was kind of a fear that held me back. Not a fear of it, but a fear of where do I start? What do I do? How do I get into this? It was during COVID is when I started to kind of look into it a little bit, and I started opening the door for myself to get into it. And also because I've dealt with the paranormal quite a bit. So I was like, okay, there's definitely something else out there. And that kind of helped push me into that direction.
When you say paranormal, just, tell me about an experience or a moment.
Sure. My husband, the first house that we ever lived in together was so haunted with something so malevolent that we literally had to like pack up and leave in like the middle of the night kind of thing.
What was this energy doing?
So Evelyn was a baby. Chloe, my youngest daughter, I wasn't even pregnant with her. She wasn't even thought of yet. And I noticed Evelyn, you could tell she was like just under a year old. You could tell that she was interacting with someone. She'd have, reaching her arms up. She'd be looking up to baby babbling to somebody, hand her toys to somebody. And then we would hear, in the middle of the night, you could hear somebody coming up the stairs in the house. Clearly, it was like old wooden floors in an old house. You could hear step creaking up these stairs. And then one night, my husband, who was made fun of me when I started saying, hey, something in this house, like, I think this house might be haunted. Because up until this point, I've always believed in the paranormal, but never really had an experience that I know of. And he would make fun of me. He was like, no, there's no such thing. And then one night, right in front of me, this like mass of like a black shadow held him down. You could hear this really fast whispering, like a woman's voice whispering really fast in his face. And he couldn't breathe, couldn't talk, couldn't move, nothing. And I said, hey, are you okay? And that made it stop for whatever reason. And then it just started escalating, bed shaking, Evelyn's crib night, wild shit.
And now, given your current experience with pagan witchcraft, what do you think was happening? What do you think this energy was trying to accomplish?
I think that it was trying to attach itself to me, honestly. I think that it was a human. Maybe they were human, but something dark in their death. And they were trying to attach themselves to me. Didn't like my husband, so didn't really do bad stuff to me. Would do little things, like if I laid down at night, I would hear like claws scratch down my pillow in front of my face. Would do mean stuff to my daughter, but thing like that to me. And then I started to feel affected, like an oppression. I think it was trying to attach itself to me for energy to, grow or whatever it was trying to do.
Do you have any idea what it was about you specifically that it was, attracted to?
I think because I paid attention to it.
You treated it with a respect, or you just paid it attention?
I paid attention to it. I kind of, I didn't ignore it. And I was so terrified of it. And I feel that it was feeding off of that fear.
When it comes to your practice of pagan witchcraft, what do you normally practice in your day-to-day?
I try to give offerings. Like I have a little altar set up for my goddess. I even get the kids into it. Like I love plants. So I have a ton of plants in the one room in the house. If any of I just had roses. I have a big rose bush outside. So I cut some of the roses and I had them in. The petals would start to fall off, but they were fresh. I taught Chloe, my youngest, she would take them all together and she'd go put them on the altar as an offering. I try to just stay positive and I try to ask for, the love and the light. And that's pretty much it. There's some days that I don't do anything. Lately, I haven't been. I've been kind of slacking. I'm still kind of learning.
As I said before, we will be lucky to see our parent live long enough to see our parents die.
Yep.
You know, in the wake of your mother's passing, presumably because that would, given the nature so far of the relationship and how she hasn't responded, that would likely be the next event or the ending of the relationship. What do you think her would be, or her retribution would be in the afterlife?
I think that she is going to have to feel all of the pain that she's caused.
Do you-
I don't know necessarily if it would be hell, but maybe as a part of her rehabilitation, maybe to face that judgment of, hey, you decided to do all of these different things during this lifetime, and you need to feel that. You need to feel what you did.
I would assume that you also feel the same way about the stepfather too, right?
Yeah.
And I think that probably my first to you and then to Evelyn.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what do you think to anybody who's listening, or what would you tell them in terms of advice on how to approach life?
You're not alone, and don't let your trauma run your life. You can be happy.
Like,
Short and simple.
do you mind if I ask Evelyn?
Yep. Can you hang on? I'll go grab her. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It's here.
Hi, Evelyn.
Hi.
Hi. You can call me Jex.
Okay.
I just interviewed your mom. Hopefully, at one point you could hear it. It'd be pretty cool for you to hear it.
Yeah.
Is it okay if I ask 2 questions?
Sure.
All right, cool. I want to ask you 2 questions, Evelyn. Is that okay?
Yes.
What do you think the point of life is?
I think the point of life is you live it so many times,
Oh yeah.
and then like it's like you don't live it anymore after you live it so many.
What do you think? Why do you think you're supposed to live it so many times?
Because I feel like you get a few chances, and if you mess them up, you mess them up.
Okay.
I feel like, Evelyn, I feel like you know more than me.
I know.
I feel-
told you.
Big brain.
And my second and last question for you would be, a lot of people are going to hear what you just said, and I think that a lot of people would like to hear your response to this question. And that question is, what would you tell these people that are listening on how to approach life in general?
How do you approach life in general? Here's my one thing.
Mm-hmm.
If something happens to you, like what happened to my mom, you should definitely tell someone about it and see if they can help you. If they cannot help you, try to help you. But my one thing, how to approach life, I want to go to a university, go to medic school, and become an anesthesiologist.
Oh, dang. Okay.
Or be a mathematician.
Okay.
But you want to, because you want to help people, right? It seems.
Yes.
Do you think that's what the point is?
Yes. And my...
Do you think the point of life is to help others?
Yeah.
Thank you, Evelyn. I appreciate it.
Uh-huh.
I hope that one day she gets to hear this. I hope that one day she gets to hear herself too.
We'll listen to it together. Love you, honey.
Bye, Mom.
Bye, honey.